At 4:36 p.m. on a Thursday, Claire Ashford was escorted out of the building by two men in grey suits. 6 minutes, that was all it took. Badge deactivated, desk cleared. 11 years of ambition, 4 of them poured into Meridian Financial, packed into a cardboard box light enough to carry with one arm. 3 weeks later, the man who arranged it would be the one leaving. But that part of the story starts somewhere else. It starts at 7:12 a.m. every morning for 3 years. It starts with a security desk in a marble lobby and a woman who did something so small, so unremarkable, that nobody who walked past ever noticed it. She stopped. Her name was Claire Ashford, 31 years old, senior project manager. She had a habit, a ritual invisible to everyone except the man it was directed at. Every morning, before she opened a single email or touched a single file, she would walk to the security desk, look the guard on duty directly in the eye, and say good morning. Not a nod, not a wave, a real greeting. She asked how his evening was. She remembered the answers. She asked again the next day. The guard posted most mornings was a man named Roy Beaumont, 54 years old, broad shoulders gone soft at the edges, 11 years in the same lobby, the same faded navy uniform, the same post. In that time, he estimated perhaps 40 people had ever learned his name. Not out of cruelty, people simply moved through lobbies the way water moves through pipes, purposeful, pressured, unseeing. Claire stopped on her 3rd morning. She extended her hand. She said, "I'm Claire Ashford. I just started in project management. What's your name?" Nobody had asked Roy his name in longer than he could remember. And so a ritual began. 3 years of good mornings, 3 years of Roy learning that Claire took her coffee black, had a sister in Edinburgh, and was quietly terrified of failing people who believed in her. 3 years of Claire learning that Roy had a daughter named Simone studying architecture, that he coached youth football on Saturday mornings, and that he had outlasted 3 security companies and 2 full executive turnovers at Meridian, and considered himself, with quiet pride, part of the building's bones. What neither of them knew was that those 3 years were building something neither could name, a door not yet needed, a hand positioned in the dark long before anyone knew to ask for it. Daniel Croft did not look like a man who destroyed things. He was 43, handsome in an institutional way, the kind of handsome that photographed well in quarterly reports. Director of Strategic Operations for 2 years. In that time, he had doubled the department's billing numbers by a method he called talent optimization in meetings. What he meant, what everyone in the room understood and no one said aloud, was that Daniel Croft had learned to take credit with surgical precision. He would stand at the edge of a project, watch, ask the right questions in the right moments. Then, when the work was done and the numbers were good, he would step forward and tell the story of it as though he had written it himself. He was very good at this. He had the instinct of someone who understood that in certain organizations, power is not built through labor, it is built through proximity to labor and the ability to narrate what happened afterward. He knew which rooms to be seen in, which conversations to position himself beside, and which names to stand next to at the right moment. He had done this at 3 companies before Meridian. He would have done it at 3 more after. Claire had built the Hartwell account from nothing. 18 months of cold outreach, failed pitches, and a client relationship held together through 2 restructurings and 1 near collapse. That near collapse happened on a November weekend, a Saturday night when an $11 million deal started to fall apart over a contractual misalignment nobody had caught. Claire spent 12 hours on the phone. She stayed until it was fixed, not because anyone asked her to, because walking away was something she had never learned how to do. The account closed at $4.2 million. The congratulations email from the executive floor named Daniel Croft. She read it twice. Her name wasn't there, not even once. She said nothing. She had learned early that speaking up in these moments was the kind of move that only ever hurt the person who made it. So she folded the email, she filed it, she kept her head down and trusted that the work would eventually speak for itself. That trust was the most expensive mistake she ever made. By March, the quiet erasure had begun. Meetings she was removed from without explanation, a 2-year client relationship reassigned to a junior associate with a note about bandwidth reallocation, calendar invitations that stopped arriving. It was the kind of dismantling that was almost invisible, slow enough that she questioned her own perception, fast enough that by the time she was certain of what was happening, the door was already closing. In April, Daniel Croft presented a restructured project management model to the board. It was polished, it was precise, it was built almost entirely on frameworks Claire had created, her terminology, her client segmentation approach, her methodology for long-cycle account management, renamed, reformatted, repossessed, presented as innovation by a man who had simply been paying close enough attention to steal it slowly. She was not in the room. She found out through an email summary sent to the full department. She read the agenda twice, looking for her name. It was not there. She looked a 3rd time, more slowly. Still not there. By the 3rd week of May, she was called into HR at 4:30 on a Thursday. A separation agreement was placed on the table before her. They gave her 20 minutes to clear her desk. She didn't fight. She packed her things into the box, the photograph of her sister, the small succulent she had kept alive for 2 years on her windowsill, 3 notebooks filled with project timelines and client notes no one would ever read, and she walked to the elevator without a word, because fighting was what Daniel Croft wanted, a scene, something he could describe later to justify the conclusion he had already written. The box was not heavy. That was the worst part. If you have ever carried everything you built in a single box and felt the weight of how little it weighed, somewhere, right now, someone else understands that feeling. Share this with them. They need to know they are not alone. She sat in the underground parking garage for 22 minutes, forehead against the steering wheel, counting breaths the way her father had taught her when she was 9 years old and the world was already learning to be too large. Then she started the engine and drove home. She did not pass through the lobby on the way out. She took the elevator straight to the basement, which meant she did not see Roy, and Roy did not see her. He found out the next morning through the small signals he had learned to read over 11 years, her badge not registering when he ran the overnight access report, her parking space empty, the particular look on the woman from HR when Roy asked quietly whether Miss Ashford was all right. The woman said she's no longer with the company, in the practiced neutral tone of someone who had been trained to say exactly that and nothing more.
Roy nodded, thanked her, signed in 2 delivery drivers. He sat with it for most of that morning. Between visitor passes and delivery sign-ins, he kept returning to her absence the way a tongue returns to a missing tooth. The gap was specific. It had a shape he could feel. He thought about Roy's network, the invisible architecture of a building that nobody in the executive suites had ever considered. 11 years at the same post, 11 years of knowing the maintenance crew, the cleaning staff, the parking attendants, the reception desks on every floor. People who moved through the building like water through pipes, invisible, everywhere, knowing everything. The kind of network that only forms when the people inside it understand that nobody above them is paying attention. They talked to each other the way people who have been overlooked for a long time learned to talk, directly, honestly, and without any reason to protect the version of events that the powerful preferred. It was through this network, 9 days after Claire left, that Roy learned what had actually happened. Not the official story, not the bandwidth reallocation or the restructure narrative. The real version, sourced from a woman who was in the April board presentation and a man who had seen Claire's original performance reviews before they were quietly revised. The version where a $4.2 million account built by one person had been handed upward, renamed, and used to position someone else for a promotion. The version where the exit was engineered not because Claire was failing, but because she was succeeding in a way that had become inconvenient. Roy sat with that for a long time. Then he did something small, something so unremarkable that no one would have looked twice at it. He called his daughter. But first, he sat in his car in the staff parking structure for a few minutes, alone, engine off. He thought about a morning 4 months earlier when Claire arrived carrying 2 coffees instead of 1 and set the spare on his desk without ceremony, already walking to the elevator when he looked up surprised. "You looked tired last Wednesday," she called back over her shoulder, figured it might be a pattern. No performance, no announcement, just someone who had been paying attention and decided to act on what she noticed. Roy drank that coffee slowly. He opened the small notebook his daughter had given him on his last birthday, the one he had carried for months and written almost nothing in. He uncapped his pen. He wrote Claire's name, the date, and 3 words beneath it. She was good. He closed the notebook, put it back in his breast pocket. Then he called Simone. He told her about a woman who asked his name when no one else had, who remembered the answers and kept asking, who left a cup of coffee on his desk because she had noticed on a Wednesday and held on to it for 4 months. He told her what had happened to that woman. He told her the real version. Then he was quiet. Simone listened to the weight in her father's voice, the specific weight she had been learning to read for 26 years, the one that meant he had seen something wrong and couldn't find the mechanism to fix it. And she said, "Send me her name." Now here is what Daniel Croft did not know. He did not know about Roy's daughter. He did not know that Simone Beaumont was 26 years old and working as an architect at a firm 3 blocks from Meridian. And he did not know, not could have known, that her direct supervisor was a woman named Dr. Patricia Wells, who had spent 4 years on the Crestfield Development Infrastructure Committee before moving into private practice. And he did not know, could not have known, that the Crestfield contract he had spent months positioning himself to win was currently in its final selection phase. worth $11 million over 3 years, the kind of contract that ends careers or makes them. Simone did not do anything improper. She did not scheme. She simply told Dr. Wells what her father had told her, that a project manager named Claire Ashford had been quietly erased from work she had built by a man who had learned to stand at the edge of other people's labor and claim the view. Dr. Wells asked one question: is she available? Meanwhile, Daniel Croft was sitting in a glass-walled conference room, presenting the Hartwell account as the centerpiece of his Crestfield pitch. Polished slides, confident delivery, a narrative of relationship management built on numbers he had memorized but not earned.
Across the table, one member of the selection committee was taking notes. His name was Vincent Hartwell. He had a very specific memory of a November Saturday, of an 11-hour phone call, of a project manager who had stayed on the line until the problem was solved, not because it was technically her responsibility, but because she was the kind of person who stayed. He remembered professionalism, he remembered competence, and he remembered something harder to name, a quality that lived in the gaps between professional obligation, in the extra hour and the returned call, and the detail nobody asked her to notice. He remembered her name. Vincent Hartwell waited until Daniel Croft finished his presentation. Then he asked 3 specific technical questions about the Hartwell account, questions that only the person who had actually done the work would know how to answer. A silence opened in the room, wide, slow, impossible to cross. 3 days after Claire Ashford was walked out of Meridian Financial, Vincent Hartwell requested a meeting with the CEO. He did not request Daniel Croft be present. It was a Tuesday when Claire's phone rang. She was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and a laptop full of job listings she had been staring at for 4 days without applying to a single one. The number was unfamiliar. She almost didn't answer. Dr. Patricia Wells introduced herself briefly and precisely. She had been given Claire's name through a contact she described as deeply trusted. She was leading a new urban infrastructure division. The Crestfield project was in final selection. A presentation slot was available in 6 days. Claire was very still. "Who gave you my name?" she asked. Dr. Wells paused. "A young architect on my team. She said she heard about you from her father." Claire stood, walked to the window. The city below her, indifferent, lit, moving, the same as it always was. "Her father," Claire said quietly. "A security guard, apparently. She said he called her the same night he found out what happened to you, told her you were someone worth finding. 3 years of good mornings, 3 years of a name remembered and a question asked and an answer kept, a cup of coffee left on a desk without ceremony, and a man who wrote 3 words in a notebook because it felt like a thing that needed to be recorded and then couldn't let it rest." Claire Ashford walked into that presentation 6 days later and did not leave a single question unanswered. The Crestfield contract was awarded to Dr. Wells's division 4 weeks after that. Claire was named lead project manager. The same week, an internal review at Meridian Financial, initiated by a formal inquiry from a selection committee member with a very specific memory, concluded its investigation into the management of the Hartwell account. Daniel Croft did not survive the review. He cleared his own desk on a Thursday afternoon. His box was not heavy either.
Roy was at his post at 6:48 in the morning. Claire came back, not to return, but to leave something. She walked through the lobby doors the same way she always had, same stride, same quiet purpose, but something was different. She was carrying nothing. No bag over her shoulder, no files under her arm, just herself. She set a small envelope on the security desk. Roy looked at it, then at her. She looked different, not damaged, rearranged, the way some people emerge from something hard and come out sharper, more precise, as though the pressure had stripped away everything that was never truly theirs to carry. Her eyes were clear. The particular tension that she now realized had lived around her jaw for the last year of her employment, the tension she had noticed but never named, was gone. "I heard about your daughter," she said. "I heard what you did." Roy shook his head once, the same slow, certain movement he made whenever a conversation tried to make him larger than he was. "I didn't do anything. I just told her the truth." "That's everything," Claire said. She held out her hand. He took it. They stood in the lobby, a woman who had been quietly erased and a man who had quietly refused to let it stand, and neither of them said anything for a moment that felt longer than it was. After she left, Roy opened the envelope. Inside was a single card. On the front, 2 words, "Thank you." On the back, she had written, "You taught me that the people the room overlooks are often the ones holding the whole building up. Never ask their names." Roy put the card in his breast pocket next to the notebook. He stood up a little straighter. The lobby doors slid open. The morning crowd moved through, quick, purposeful, unseeing. Roy watched them pass. He was still there. He was always still there. And from somewhere inside that invisible architecture of that building, something that had been built across 3 years of unremarkable mornings quietly held. Some kindnesses do not announce themselves. They simply take their position. They wait. And when the moment arrives, when the floor gives way and the walls close in and the last visible exit disappears, the door that opens is not new. It was built years ago, in the dark, by someone who never expected to be thanked. Have you ever been seen by someone the world had decided to overlook? If this story landed somewhere real for you, leave a word below. Someone scrolling past this right now needs to know they are not invisible. This is God's Hand Stories, where every story has a hand behind it you didn't see until the very end.